Adventure, history, science, and fantasy. These are the thematic realms of that experimental, immersive playground we now know simply as Disneyland. Back in the early 50s, Disneyland was an ambitious project both financially and artistically. Nothing quite like it had ever been conceived. There had always been public parks for recreation and relaxation, as well as amusement parks for cheap thrills and fun. But the phrase theme park had yet to enter our everyday vocabulary. Walt wanted to create a place that would be as beautiful, quaint, and natural as a local public park, but as entertaining as a traveling carnival, minus the cheap thrills. In order to fuse these two ideas together, Walt added the special ingredient of storytelling, urban planning, and art. But a park that did all of that? How was this absurd idea going to secure any sort of financial backing? Walt knew that in order to sell not only to backers, but the public on such an idea, he would need to imbue them with a sense of heightened anticipation. With his ventures into live-action filmmaking in the 1950s and the new advent of television, Walt would find this solution, and, in the course of Disney history, it would eventually lead to one particular attraction that would represent all the themes of Disneyland: yesterday, tomorrow, and fantasy.
The motion picture screen explodes with unprecedented power as the two masters of imagination, Jules Verne and Walt Disney, join to bring you a shattering new experience in entertainment. Read by countless millions, translated into 18 languages, this classic adventure is a story of measureless scope, fraught with fantastic beauty and danger. Four great stars give the spark of life to its leading characters in a series of inspirational performances. Kirk Douglas as the master harpooner Ned Land. James Mason as Captain Nemo, who held the destiny of the world in his hands. Paul Lucas as Professor Aronnax of the Paris Institute. Peter Lorre as Conseil. The most vivid scenes from the novel become unforgettable on the screen. The luxurious interior of the submarine, the revelation of the hidden mysteries of the deep, the mighty harvests of the ocean kingdom, and the strange creatures that menace the intruders on the ocean floor. And after a safe return, the memorable dinner party. And to stay in your memory as the most thrilling sequence ever photographed in motion picture history, the terrifying battle with the giant squid.
Disneyland began construction on July 16, 1954. Walt would strike a deal with ABC to create a television series to excite the public about this new kind of park. The result was the Disneyland Television series.
Walt Disney's Disneyland.
When you wish upon a star.
Each week, viewers would be transported to one of the many lands the park would explore: Fantasyland, Adventureland, Frontierland, and Tomorrowland. For Adventureland, Walt would serialize his true-life adventure nature documentaries. For Fantasyland, he would showcase his animation studio's exciting slate of new films, and for Frontierland, he would create the iconic Davy Crockett television series. But Tomorrowland would prove to be more of a challenge. Since the land would focus on science fact, Walt created a series of science documentaries about the future of space travel in the atomic age. This may have excited a young generation about the future, but was it enough to draw people to a physical place? At the same time Disneyland was under construction with its odd concept rapidly selling to the American public, Walt released a game-changing film on December 23, 1954, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, based on the Jules Verne novel of the same name. With his team of artists, many of whom are already transitioning into WED at the same time to design Disneyland, Walt created a giant squid, a remote and mysterious island, and the underwater vessel that would forever be imprinted in all of our imaginations, the Nautilus. While 20,000 Leagues advanced the storytelling capacity for visual effects in film, and was awarded an Oscar for those efforts, it also served as a true beginning of Disneyland's explorations into designing physical spaces outside of the realm of animation. But with time running out on building Tomorrowland, Walt needed something to draw the public in. And if space documentaries weren't enough, what would get people excited about the future? The solution was to use the success of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea to spawn interest in the unfinished land. And so, the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea exhibit was born. This attraction took guests into an immersive walkthrough with all the original sets and props from the award-winning film. Inside, guests could see an 11-foot model of the Nautilus and explore the wheelhouse, the chart room, Professor Ironax's cabin, the salon, pump room, diving chamber, fitting chamber, and power supply room. It even featured Captain Nemo's organ and an encounter with the famous giant squid. Well, at least safely behind a porthole, that is. The attraction was a success and helped secure a popular interest in Tomorrowland. And why shouldn't it have? Jules Verne was the forefather of the science fiction genre, and his then fantastical invention of a submarine eventually inspired science fact. It proved to be a perfect fit for the first draft of Tomorrowland. So it was only natural that by 1959, Walt and his team were ready to breathe new life into not only just one land, but into the park as a whole, one attraction of which would not only propel Captain Nemo's legacy, but theme park history.
Coming up next, get ready to hear all about Disney news on this week's Matterhorn Mondays. Then, it's Historyland, where extinct Disney attractions come to life.
Eastman Cordell, champion of stay fresh fibers.
And now here in Slip 1, the Eastman Cordell special, the Triton, featuring Cordell, new champion of stay fresh fibers, in a preview of golf jackets that stay looking smoother, slacks that keep their crease longer, rainwear that keeps its good looks, suits that fight wrinkles better, shirts that wash and wear easier, and easy to care for women's fashions. And now, Miss Julia Meade.
Hi. You know, Cordell is different from other fibers because Cordell is the liveliest polyester fiber. It's so lively, it fights off wrinkles better and keeps clothes looking fresher and crisper. Now, for instance, let's compare a suit made with ordinary fibers to one made with Cordell fibers. Here's the ordinary suit being crushed. This microscopic view shows that ordinary fibers don't fight back and the wrinkles stay in. But Cordell acts like thousands of tiny muscles to smooth and flatten the fabric. The wrinkles don't have a chance. That's why clothes made with Cordell look fresher and stay fresher longer.
Arriving soon in stores all over America from Alligator, Arrow, Esquire Sportswear, Manhattan, McGregor, Michael Stern, Timely Clothes, Varsity Town, Palm Beach, Weldon. Clothes made with Cordell.
Eastman Cordell, champion of stay fresh fibers.
In 1959, with the Disneyland Experiment well overcoming its opening day disaster just 4 years earlier, Walt and his Imagineers were able to finally realize a vision for the Tomorrowland they had always wanted. With the addition of the monorail sailing above the heart of Tomorrowland, and the monorail standing stoically next to the castle in Fantasyland and edging the border of Tomorrowland, Disney had a new spirit injected into its soul. But the attraction resting under and between these two icons was an adventure down into the depths of our own planet's final frontier, liquid space. The submarine voyage was christened on June 14, 1959, along with the rest of the new expansions. On this attraction, guests would be able to board a nuclear submarine as it voyaged past a coral reef, a graveyard of lost ships, the North Pole, and down to the bottom of the sea. There, the expedition encountered strange new species of fish, including a giant squid, underwater volcanoes, mermaids, the lost continent of Atlantis, and a sea serpent. The voyage then comes to a close as the ship returned to the surface with a confounded captain and first mate.
Captain, we should enter this in the log, shouldn't we?
No, forget it. Nobody would believe it anyway. I think we've been submerged too long.
Guests would observe these various scenes from multiple portholes looking into the water, which started in the outside portion of the lagoon. This allowed for the effect of being in a shallow water coral reef, but once the submarines passed under the waterfall and into a show building, guests would feel as though they were diving deeper and deeper into the mysteries of liquid space. Although the submarines weren't technically submarines at all, they were constructed with a military-grade level of detail. After being manufactured at Todd Shipyards in San Pedro, California, they were sent to the Disneyland Naval Yard to continue work under former Rear Admiral Joe Fowler, who after retiring from the Navy oversaw the construction of Disneyland. General Dynamics Electric Boat Division, who designed the US Navy's first fleet of nuclear-powered submarines, even served as a consultant on the design of the fleet. This was a project meant to explore the scientific potential for the submarine as a viable technology for future exploration. But the fantasies entertained in the new attraction's voyage created a perfect blend of science fact and science fiction, serving as the perfect transition from the land of tomorrow to the land of fantasy. Given the popular success of this groundbreaking attraction, by the time Tomorrowland would undergo not simply another expansion, but a complete overhaul in the mid-1960s, one attraction didn't seem necessary for Tomorrowland's success. This, of course, was the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea walkthrough. Although it made the land possible in the very beginning, its legacy already carried over to the submarine voyage. But when plans were underway for Walt Disney World, Imagineers found a way to blend the two together. This time it wouldn't be designed as a celebration of technological achievement, nor would it sit halfway between tomorrow and fantasy. In fact, it would embrace its full presence in Fantasyland. This time, it would create an imagination of Jules Verne, who created the original story, and Walt Disney, who shot it on film. This also affected its construction, which would follow Harper Goff's classic Nautilus design from the film, and will be overseen not by a former Rear Admiral, but by Imagineer Bob Gurr, designer of the Disneyland monorail, the first human animatronic figures, and so on. Even Disney legend and Imagineer Tony Baxter got his start in Imagineering working on this ride. The attraction would function largely in the same way it did in Disneyland, sailing in a designated lagoon, passing under a waterfall, and into a show building. But the experience would be totally different. Now you weren't just embarking on any submarine voyage, you were embarking on an adventure with Captain Nemo, who would also narrate your adventure. Guests would pass through similar scenes as they did in Disneyland, but this time with Nemo's haunting organs serenading the trip, adding a sense of tension, mystery, and intrigue. This built to the attraction's climax, a battle with the giant squid. Like its Disneyland counterpart, the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea submarine voyage became a popular and beloved attraction. With two versions of the same attraction in each park, it seemed that the submarines had become a staple of the Disney parks. But with Walt Disney dead for almost 15 years, a company in financial flux, and constant upper and lower management shifts, could ambitious projects like the submarine stand the test of time? Or would they eventually suffer the fate many projects did during the period that allowed? For the first time in a long time, the future was unclear.
Coming up next, Get ready to hear all about Disney news on this week's Matterhorn Mondays. Then, it's Historyland, where extinct Disney attractions come to life.
Look, Mickey Mouse! The castle! Oh, let's go!
In winter? It's a great time to go. See for yourself.
Belle!
You'll meet Beauty and the Beast in person, and right now see a spectacular live musical show straight from Disney's new hit film. There's so much to do all over Euro Disney this winter, you'll want to stay forever.
See you tomorrow, Mickey.
Call this number now or see your travel agent for winter rates.
In 1967, Disneyland's Tomorrowland had undergone a successful transformation that would truly reshape its public perception and potential. By the late 80s, the submarines had received a fresh coat of paint. Instead of the nuclear, Cold War gray color they donned in the 50s and 60s, they were now painted a bright yellow to represent oceanographer ships as opposed to military ships. Over in Florida, the attraction was still going strong. Both had maintained their status as guest favorites. But in the late 80s and early 90s, Disney's new CEO, Michael Eisner, had plans to bring Disney to Europe with Euro Disney, or as we know it today, Disneyland Paris. While the park turned out to be one of the best in quality, having been designed by the disciples of the first generation Imagineers and artists, these disciples included Tony Baxter, Tim Delaney, Tom Morris, and Eddie Soto, it proved to be a financial disaster. For the full backstory on the history of Disneyland Paris, you can watch my previous episode of Historyland all about the subject. The financial blow from Euro Disney was felt all the way back across the Atlantic. Budgets for future park projects were severely cut back, but even with that in place, high maintenance and upkeep costs for running the parks had become a financial burden. Florida's submarines were the first to receive this blow. The submarines were always expensive to maintain. The entire lagoon would have to be drained for any refurbishment, and divers had to enter the water to perform nightly maintenance. So, at the height of Disney's financial low in 1994, the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea submarine voyage closed for what seemed to be maintenance periods. But by 1996, with its ships still not setting sail, it closed forever. By the late 90s, with another Tomorrowland overhaul on its way, and a second theme park planned for the Disneyland Resort, both of which already crippled with low funds, some attractions had to go. With New Tomorrowland opening in 1998, it opened with the submarines still in place, but like Florida with its high maintenance costs, and because of the severe financial setbacks caused by Euro Disney, the original submarine voyage that was almost about to celebrate 40 years in Disneyland closed. The impact of these closures is almost hard to put into words, but Tony Baxter possibly described it best when he told Disneyland's president at the time, Paul Pressler, "I'm sorry, this is one of the worst days of my life." I think that says it all. But 20,000 Leagues' legacy was still going strong. In the Paris equivalent of Tomorrowland, Discoveryland, a land dedicated to the pioneers of science fiction, guests can still enter the Nautilus, but this time back to how it might have been in 1955. This newly imagined walk-through attraction allows guests the ability to physically walk on board Captain Nemo's ship and explore every corner, and yes, even encounter a giant squid. Still safely from a porthole, of course. When plans in the late 90s were underway for a second park in Tokyo Disneyland, Tokyo Disney Sea, Imagineers brought the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea submarine voyage back, but in a newly imagined way. Instead of riding in the Nautilus in one large submarine, now guests sit in small square submarines hanging from a track in a similar fashion to Peter Pan's ride. In this more intimate and immersive version, guests are guided by Captain Nemo on an expedition to make new oceanic discoveries. Guests are supposed to manually control searchlights attached to the vessel to explore the waters as they encounter buried treasure, new sea life, and the lost city of Atlantis. Both these incarnations of 20,000 Leagues can still be enjoyed today. Back to the West Coast, when the submarine voyage closed, plans were made to revive it based on the upcoming animated film Atlantis. But the film turned out to be a box office failure, making the return of the submarines less and less likely. but in 2003, Pixar's successful release of Finding Nemo would give Imagineers hope. Finally, there was an avenue for bringing back the submarines, and Tony Baxter would lead the front. On July 11, 2007, the submarines returned as the Finding Nemo submarine voyage. Today, a missing piece of Disneyland is restored, and guests can once again look out onto the lagoon from Fantasyland, with submarines swimming by. A view that could never have existed without the help of one feature film that would shape the future of Tomorrowland. The legacy of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea has become a vital piece of understanding the spirit and philosophy of the Disney parks. The attractions and even lands it inspired had invoked the original spirit of Disneyland, that it is a monument to imagination in all that it possesses, be it historical, fantastical, adventurous, and beyond. 20,000 Leagues' legacy from Jules Verne to Walt Disney is a testament to this grand experiment of artistry that still prevails to this day. And let us continue to hope that these values will transcend today and thrust us to a great big beautiful tomorrow. And that's the history of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. As always, thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this in the future. And right off the bat, I want to apologize for how gross I sound. I either have a cold, or my allergies are really bad. I can't really tell the difference between the two, so I'm just gonna say my allergies are bad. My nose has been stuffy, it's been running all week, and yeah, just wanted to apologize for that. If any of you have experienced any version of the submarines, please share down in the comments. I'd love to know what you thought of them. And if you haven't already, be sure to follow my second channel. Links will be in the description as always. My second channel is where I'll be having all my live streams, my Matterhorn Mondays streams, my other different kinds of streams that I'm going to be doing when I go to the parks and whatnot. At least just until I'm able to stream on this account again. So yeah, go sub to my second channel, make sure to follow me on Twitter, and support my channel on Patreon. I'm coming out with a lot of new perks for my patrons, pins and stickers and VHS tapes, so be sure to head over to my Patreon. Like I said, links will be in the description. And also, if you haven't already, be sure to check out my weekly podcast that I do with Alex the Historian. And as always, have a great big beautiful tomorrow.